Well, since this morning, I have had scores and scores, actually, probably 300 plus comments, questions, statements about the Supreme Court ruling this morning. I read Justice Scalia's dissent, and I recommend that every person read the dissent, his disagreement with the ruling. And the gist of the dissent says, to protect marriage is not to attack someone who chooses not to be married. And what the Supreme Court did was not to protect only what they call gay marriage, but is to attack traditional marriage that our nation has been built on. You'll find a source of encouragement by reading his dissent and understand that everyone on the court is not in agreement, and you'll hear more about that, I'm sure. I want to share some of my response that I've had today. I did an interview with a reporter from the Herald Leader, and just a lot of different responses, and I want to share some of these things. First of all, I'm concerned, like you are, when a court of 5 people can overturn the will of the people and the heritage of a nation that voted to protect marriage 33 times. Now, to me, that's a separate issue. Think about that. 33 times it's been on the ballot of protecting marriage. And 5 people decided today that they will not respect nor recognize, and they forced their ruling against that. I think that's a different issue, and I think that's very sad. I'm concerned, second of all, that the president quickly brought in the leaders of the homosexual movement to congratulate them on their victory when 400 years of American history and heritage is trampled on. And of course, he also brought in a Muslim that strongly supports Hamas and has been a strong supporter of that organization for a long time. So I'm no longer surprised by anything the president does in that regard. Third of all, I spoke to a reporter today who asked me quite a few questions about, her basic questions were about how I thought this might affect the state of Kentucky. And first of all, I'm glad that I live in Kentucky, where traditional marriage is protected by a constitutional amendment in 2004. Now, I have some concern that the Supreme Court, if that were challenged, would not try to overturn that, and certainly there are folks already with that desire. But let it be known, I'm glad that I live in this state, and that took place in 2004, and that's one of the reasons that we need to be involved in such issues. We need not sit back and just let folks do as they desire. When we do nothing, evil prevails, and it takes a lot of time, but it's worth it. I also mentioned to the reporter today, I'm concerned that there are 4 cities in Kentucky and at least 2 universities that are currently ignoring the constitutional amendments with fairness ordinances. And that is what they call a fairness ordinance. That's what they chose. I'm concerned about that. I posted this on Facebook, and I've had hundreds of responses, not just on Facebook, but in other ways. I wrote these words: I sort of feel like a missionary in a foreign country today. I find myself in a nation with no moral compass, where a Supreme Court can rule against the will of the people, a president who congratulates the immoral and godless, an amazing Christian heritage that is forgotten or ignored. I sure do miss my old America, a nation whose motto is, "In God we trust," where founding fathers declared that our Constitution is made only for a moral and a religious people. However, we will press on. You can lose an inning and still win the game. You can lose a battle and still win the war. You can lose a round and still win the fight. We will fight on. We will press on, for we are on the winning side. And we are. And I'm thankful that we are. Then I want to say number 5, this most important thing I'll say in this list of 7 things. My faith and hope is not in circumstances of life around me. My faith and hope are in the promises of God. Think, if you will, where the faith of the martyrs were. Now think of that. Where was the faith of the martyr? Now we regret what we've lost. They were fighting for what we lost. But when I think of their faith was not in circumstances. So, if their faith was not in circumstances, my faith cannot be in circumstance. My faith must be in the promises of God. And my hope is still in the Lord. Then I want to say our work in the local church cannot change except to increase. I believe there will be folks awakened by this in America. I've had many notes from folks today that said, I thought this would never happen. I guess I ought to get involved. And that I think, I pray that it will resonate across the nation. I believe there are folks that will be looking for a church that takes a stand for truth and right. I've had very few. I have had some that have been quite vicious in their comments. And I'll tell you what I do with those. I don't make stew out of them. Does your computer have a delete button, a little X on it? Well, I just take my little mouse and jump as hard as that little mouse will jump and land right on that X and delete it. I don't stew over that. I meditate on this. And so there's folks that'll look for a church that stands for truth and right. Then let me say last of all, sometimes it was only judgment that could bring about a desire for true revival. I don't want judgment to come. The Bible says of Elijah, he was a man subject to like passions like as we are, and yet he prayed that it might not rain. It rained not on the earth for the space of 3 years and 6 months. He was affected by that as much as everyone else, but he desired revival. We don't want revival. We want our economy revived. We want our prosperity revived. Perhaps we'll come to the place that we want our relationship with God revived. We're in a city tonight that there are churches that have canceled church on Wednesday night and they call it family night. Have family night on Tuesday night. Have Bible study on Wednesday night. I wouldn't cancel. There have been times that that I had to walk to get to church. And there have been times I thought nobody would show up, just be me and my wife. And I thought, boy, I'll get her today. I'll let her have it today. And I couldn't believe the crowd of folks always show up. There are folks, members of our church tonight, because their church kept canceling church every time the weatherman said we're going to have weather. And they found themselves in a stretch of time coming to our church, and they said, we might as well go there all the time. At least we know they're always going to have church. And they came and they liked it, and they're glad. Am I discouraged? I'm so disappointed. I'm disappointed. But my hope is still alive. I could preach the sermon I preached on the first Sunday of June. I could preach it tonight with the same fervor, the same faith, the same passion. My hope has never been. It's not in the circumstances. It is not. My hope is in the Lord.